Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar session. On behalf of BIS Research, I would like to welcome you all to our webinar on cybersecurity in automotive, connected vehicles, and growing security vulnerabilities. This is Shaik from the research division at BIS Research, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. BIS Research is a leading global market intelligence research and advisory company that focuses on emerging trends in technology, which are likely to disrupt the dynamics of the market. The mission is to harness the potential of disruptive technologies to make business thrive in today's digital age. For today's webinar, we have an esteemed list of speakers. First, we have Mr. David Barzilai, the co-founder, VP Sales and Marketing of Karamba Security. David is a seasoned sales and marketing executive with a track record of fast revenue growth and significantly increasing shareholder value. David serves as Karamba Security's VP Sales and Marketing, responsible for achieving the company's sales, demand creation goals, and market branding. David has earned a BA in Computer Science from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. Next up, we have Mr. Andrew Till, the General Manager Secure Platform at Trustonic. Andrew is an experienced commercial and technology leader. Over the past 25 years, he has worked in a wide range of high-tech industries and sector. This has included working on multiple innovation projects from Linux-based IVI platforms to connected car services. Prior to joining Trustonic, Andrew held senior leadership positions with Harman, Symphony Teleca, Motorola, and Cyan. Andrew has also held various positions in industry forums, as well as being a regular industry speaker and commentator. We also have with us Mr. Dhruva Jyoti Narayan, Principal Analyst of the Mobility Vertical at BIS Research. He is a keen electric vehicle enthusiast and has been tracking electric vehicle technologies for approximately 5 years and has co-authored more than 70 technical market intelligence reports, custom studies, and client presentations in the electric vehicle. I thank all the panelists for their gracious presence. So let's discuss the agenda for today. So we'll start by highlighting the current trends and future potential for automotive cybersecurity solutions, key developments, and industry players within the ecosystem, along with the attack vectors pertaining to automotive cybersecurity solutions. In the next 45 minutes, we are all keen to learn from your experience about automotive cybersecurity solutions, and towards the end of the discussion, I'll open the panel to the audience for any questions. I would like to request everyone in the audience to kindly mute your phones during the webinar and type in the questions towards the end of the webinar. Any questions that will not be able to answer today shall be reverted on a blog post or through email. Now let me open the panel for discussion and invite thoughts for discussion from Mr. Dhruva Jyoti Narayan. Over to you, Dhruva Jyoti.
Right. Thank you, Shaik. Please move to the next slide. Right. So first of all, before discussing cybersecurity, for my part, I would like to add some base on the overall technology. So obviously, for automotive cybersecurity, we have to talk about the connected cars. So connected cars have created a new ecosystem within the automotive industry, one which is forging a host of innovative partnerships with technology companies, OEMs, and various companies within the supply chain. These collaborations are becoming increasingly focused on creating new products and services to meet the diverse lifestyle of the consumers. Now, because of this, there is the involvement of hardwiring, telecommunications, operating systems, real-time analytics, content platforms, and various other elements that adds to the driving experience. Now, the ecosystem itself is evolving at a very high rate and complexity. And because of this, either we talk about small things like maintenance notifications to GPS to advanced sensors for parking or for driving on the highway or connecting the car to your smartphone itself. These are seeing significant improvements over time. But also because of this, we are seeing more and more sync between the vehicle and the cloud and the software system itself. Next slide, please. So within connected car, there are various uh, uh, components, and they have their own respective interaction for the car architecture. So we have got the telematics control unit, we have the RDS satellite unit, the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity, then onboard diagnostics, the ECUs, various gateways, uh, such as the Ethernet gateway or the ECU gateways. So the point is, the car as of now is not just your engine and motors, and it has evolved into a very complex um, computer itself, and this has been the way since the past uh, decade and a half. So with this complexity, we are in more of a need of automotive cybersecurity than ever. Next slide, please. Right. So if we look at a vehicle now, so there are various attack vectors that can make the car vulnerable from various point of views. So, as discussed earlier, we have various sensors like camera, LiDAR, radars, then OBD tools. Then there are connectivity with the cloud. There is GPS network, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to X networking. There are internal and external storage devices. If we talk about electric vehicles, so there are grid connectivity and charging connectivity. The point is that there are multiple attack vectors that are there right now, which makes the car vulnerable from multiple places. So we should look into how this is shaping the current and future potential for cybersecurity in automotive. Next slide, please. Right. So when we talk about trends, first of all, so there are various trends, including increasing adoption of connected vehicles and autonomous driving technology by manufacturers. So adding on to my earlier point related to connected vehicles, we have autonomous vehicles which are increasing their penetration day by day. Currently, we have level 1, level 2 vehicles on the road. Soon, in a couple of years, we are going to have level 4 to level 3. There are various experiments by companies like Waymo and Zox, which are looking into level 5. So all of these obviously includes an interaction of multiple sensors, and so that is where cybersecurity certainly comes into play. Next, there is a growing focus on V2X equipped vehicles in the connected vehicle industry. So because of V2X, the chances of cyber crimes have also increased, because these technologies are not immune to any threats and brings a lot of pathways into the cyber for the cyber attacker to hack into the system. So uh, another trend would be for the growing demand of cloud-based applications in automotive industry, wherein we talk about cloud storage. There are various automatic updates for vehicle systems. There are different types of apps which are utilized within car infotainment, and these also become vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks. Now, within growth factors, there is an increase in usage of electronics per vehicle and growing number of connected cars. So this also includes rising cyber threats owing to increase in data and connectivity of the vehicles, and also rising sales of electric vehicles, as I mentioned before, in terms of connectivity to the grid and to the charging network. Now, some challenges which we realized are happening in the cybersecurity industry after talking to various industry experts. So one of them is the lack of skilled cybersecurity professionals. Another one is highly complex ecosystem with presence of multiple stakeholders, sometimes even lack of regulations, which makes the ecosystem more and more complex. And then the high cost of automotive cybersecurity solutions, especially in terms of implementation when we talk about developing countries, or wherever the regulations are lax. So these type of challenges have been faced by a lot of businesses offering cybersecurity solutions. And the opportunities here are that the demand for these solutions are increasing because of the various attacks on automotive that we have seen in the recent past, and the growing digital solutions for semi-autonomous and autonomous vehicles. The sheer number of sensors and the software going into these vehicles, the consumer nevertheless needs these type of cybersecurity solutions to keep their car safe. Next slide, please. So some of the key players we identified here, and obviously there are many more. This particular market has a lot of players coming into play. So we have mentioned that within our slide. And then some of the key developments that we have seen, where companies like Aptiv, NXP, Argus, Denso, and Garrett, they have uh, um, worked towards either releasing new products or working towards partnerships with either research institutes or with automotive OEMs to strengthen their market share in the coming years. Next slide, please. Right. So there are also various regulations currently. As I mentioned earlier, some of the regulations, like most of the regulations for automotive cybersecurity or software security in various countries are still a bit lax, but these are some solutions, some regulations that have been put forward. So one is there related to ISO SE, which is co-developed by the International Standard of Organization and Society of Automotive Engineers, and it primarily focuses on cybersecurity risk related to the development of vehicle electronics, and describes how cybersecurity engineering should work in automotive. Then we have the UNECE rule, that is by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. So within this also there are certain regulations for safety and security for the vehicle on the road, and certain sections are there related to cybersecurity. And lastly, another one is by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, that is the MIIT. So this is based from China. So this targets the establishment of basic standard systems focusing on um, the cybersecurity, its facility, the internet connectivity security, and so on, that are related to vehicles. So apart from this, the need of the hour, as per our analysis, is obviously to include more and more uh, rigid regulations, and the drive should be from both the government and the OEMs, so that the cars become safer. Next slide, please. Right. So at this point, I would like to invite David to add his perspective in our webinar today.
Thank you very much. And thank you, the BIS Research team, for hosting me here today. So I'd like to describe today the software-defined vehicle, what it is, what's the motivation, definitely in high level. We don't have time to go too deep into the SDV, the software-defined vehicle architecture, but to provide the notion of what it is and what are the cybersecurity challenges that it faces, definitely in view or in light of the cybersecurity standards and regulation that were just described. And I'll conclude with Karamba Security's offerings and how they enable OEMs and tier ones to meet those regulations, whether if they go over to the software-defined vehicle architecture, or even just with a connected car. Next slide, please. The first part of the session is the software-defined vehicle, as I said. Next slide. And it starts with the motivation. The idea here is to make the vehicle a service platform. So if the common wisdom, if you may, with the most vehicle OEMs, with the exception of Tesla, when they sell the car to the end customer, in essence, they lose touch and lose contact with the end customer. They know the dealers, but they do not know the consumer that buys the car and uses the car. What Tesla has taught the industry is that the car could be a service platform where OEMs maintain direct contact with the end customers. And the idea is to enable the end users to benefit from features on demand, to have third-party applications, to have the ability of the OEM to do over-the-air updates for maintenance and support, as well as for upselling features to the end customer. Next slide. In order to do that, there is a major transformation of the vehicle architecture. If today we have in most vehicles, we have the network that consists of 80 to 100 ECUs, the electronic control units, connected via multiple networks or sub-networks like CAN and Ethernet and so on. The idea of SDV is to consolidate the ECUs. And to do that by running multiple virtual constituents, virtual entities of that run multiple operating systems like AutoSAR and Linux and Android, all running on top of a hypervisor, which runs on top of a high-performance computing platform. If today, as I said, we have 80 to 100 ECUs, the goal of software-defined vehicle is to have three. One ECU that runs all connectivity applications, one that runs all safety applications, and one that runs all user experience applications like infotainment and others. With that, by the way, there is an intermediate step of a domain controller where you have about ECUs consolidated to a domain. But then again, they're all being consolidated to a domain and later on to those virtual ECUs that only few of them running in the vehicle. Next slide, please. When you have those virtual entities, in essence, the ability to update the ECUs in runtime is much greater. So from the end user point of view, they have much greater agility. Because if today OEMs buy a system from a tier one, and the system is comprised on the ECU's hardware and software bundled, when you have the ECU software, the ECU consolidation, now you have a separation. And end users could buy third-party applications running on top of those consolidated ECUs. From the OEM's benefit, then you have, first of all, hardware commoditization. Secondly, it means that they can in-source software development. They develop much more software in-house. They also reduce the weight of the vehicle because once you consolidate the ECUs, you also have much less need for cables and physical cables in the network. So in essence, it's a major cost-cutting benefit for the OEM. So from the end user experience, you have much greater agility, the ability to have third-party applications deployed directly onto the consolidated ECU. And from the OEMs, you have a major cost benefit as a result of this architecture. Next slide. That also means that from the supply chain point of view, you have a major radical change. Because if today we have a pyramid, when I said that tier one says hardware system together, and the tier one is relying on in-sourced software development, and tier twos that develop hardware and software to the system, and it's a pyramid, as I mentioned, with the software-defined vehicle, you have a flattened supply chain, where the tier one provide the hardware, the tier two provide the software, and many others. So in essence, you have a much flattened model that increases the cybersecurity risks that we're going to talk about. Next slide. The benefit of that software-defined vehicle is also to reduce significantly the development time. Given that you have the ability to run modules of software that are developed independently and deployed independently onto the consolidated ECU, the idea is to reduce design to development or design to deployment cycle from 1 year to 2 years to 3 to 6 months. Next slide. And as such, last slide for this part. The foundations of the software-defined vehicle is the ability to enable agility for the OEM, but also for the end customer, and speed. Much faster time to market, many more modules that you could use, and third-party products that you could deploy on this software-defined vehicle architecture. Next slide. But when it comes to cybersecurity, we need to be extremely sensitive to the cybersecurity regulations, because with the cybersecurity regulation, it's not about how well you do. If you don't meet the regulation, you are not allowed to sell your vehicle in regions that adopted those regulations. Next slide. Those regulations considered two main factors. First of all, the idea of the vehicle to become much more software enabled, like a mobile phone on wheels, but also connected frequently to the cloud. But above all, it's also safety and privacy. So it's not just a mobile phone security that could be deployed here or cloud security measures, because here we need to be very sensitive to safety and privacy that those regulations mandate OEMs and their suppliers to meet. Next slide. Those regulations started with the United Nations Regulation 155, which is based on the ISO standard, or the ISO SAE 21434. The UNR 155 was ratified in 2020. The ISO was ratified 2021, but it went into effect for new vehicle types in the EU as of July 2022, and for all new connected vehicles as of July 2024. So it's a very broad coverage, and if you don't meet it, as I said, you cannot sell in the EU. And if you sell as a tier 1 or a tier 2 to an OEM, they require you as their supplier to meet the standard, otherwise they wouldn't be able to sell the vehicles in the EU. Next slide. But then China came last month in May of 2023 with a draft which is much stricter than the United Nations Regulation 155. And that we're going to talk about it in the coming slides, but the idea is that the Chinese regulators, although just a draft, not final yet, required the OEMs to meet that standard, which we're going to talk about, and it will go into effect in 2025 for new vehicle types and all new connected vehicles as of 2027. Next slide. The idea of those two regulations is to make sure that when you develop software going into the vehicle, you need to make sure that your development processes are secure. You need to make sure that you do threat analysis risk assessment as part of the design. You need to verify your supplier's security posture. You need to do penetration testing, and you must pass homologation by an independent authorized auditor in order to be able or to be allowed to sell your vehicles in those target markets of the EU and China. Next slide. But not only you need to make sure that your development processes and your suppliers are secure, it also put the barrier on OEMs and suppliers to look at the security posture of the vehicle and its components after production. So if there are new vulnerabilities reported, you need to be aware, you need to prioritize and come with a remediation plan to the auditors in order to show that you have the processes to do that, so you can remediate cybersecurity vulnerabilities reported on your software or hardware or your vehicles entirely, depends where you are on the supply chain hierarchy, post-production to end of life. Next slide. I said before that the Chinese regulators took it to a stricter area, it was given that not only that you also need to be accountable for the runtime integrity of your software. So if there is malware deployed on your vehicle, you need to pre-deploy active measures to protect your ECU and software against malware and the ability to kidnap software during runtime. And not only that, but remember, we said that with a software-defined vehicle, the idea is to open it up to third-party suppliers, like an app store. But then the Chinese regulation forces OEMs to be accountable to security posture of all of their third-party suppliers, including App Store, App Store deployed ones. This is a very high bar to meet, and the idea of the Chinese regulators is to make their vehicles ready for the software-defined vehicle era. Next slide. Now, the last part of my talk here, and I see that I'm on time, which is good, is what does Karamba Security do in order to enable OEMs, Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers to meet those cybersecurity regulations. Next slide. So one slide about us. We were established in 2016. We have more than 120 projects considered to be a leader by Gartner, by TU Automotive, by others, a leader in the area of automotive and IoT cybersecurity. Next slide. The promise of Karamba's portfolio is to enable suppliers and OEMs to meet the cybersecurity regulations, to maintain the bar of cybersecurity posture without interfering time to market. So even when you do software-defined vehicle, when you are measured by agility and speed, the idea is to enable you to meet the cybersecurity requirements and regulations throughout the life cycle of the software or the device or the vehicle without interfering your time to market and SOP plans. We do that with a combination of portfolio of products and services from the start to the post-production without bothering R&D, without changing R&D processes. We do not require source code. We do not require to change your suppliers' processes or your own R&D processes or your post-production processes. Next slide. What does it mean? It means that for the shift left, for the pre-production, we have automated threat analysis and risk assessment that you must do in order to meet the regulation. So you have kind of like a wizard. You populate in it the type of ECU that you would like to certify and the interfaces going in and out that ECU, the ASIL level, and based on that type of ECU and based on the applications running on it and the interfaces, we are utilizing a database that we have created from all of our projects in order to automate the TARA, Threat Analysis Risk Assessment report creation. So you will be able to show to the auditor that you did it and you do it fast without interfering your R&D. Secondly, binary analysis. That means that we automatically scan the firmware and from it, we identify your supplier's vulnerabilities, we prioritize them and provide remediation plan, all done automatically. Thirdly, penetration testing. And the penetration testing that we do is not just for the sake of penetration testing, but also to focus on the critical vulnerabilities explain to you how to remediate and provide justification why the others could be postponed for now. So in order for you to meet your SOP plan, focusing only the most critical issues and wait with the others. Everything is justified by our penetration testing process. Next slide. And for the protection, like the Chinese regulation requirements, our software that is deployed today in tens of millions of products is automatically applied to the firmware, protects it against malware runtime, buffer overflow, heap overflow attempts, whether for known vulnerabilities or new ones. All that is done automatically. And we also create high fidelity alerts in production in order to identify issues in runtime and ability to shorten significantly to time of remediation. Next slide, which is the last one. Indeed. So to summarize, we software-defined vehicle is a sea change for the industry. There is a clash between the speed and agility of software-defined vehicle to the cybersecurity regulation. And with Karamba's portfolio, we enable to bridge over that clash because we enable OEMs, tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers to meet the regulations without delaying their time to market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. David Barzilai, for sharing your insights on cybersecurity in automotive. Next up, I'd like to invite Mr. Andrew Till, our next guest speaker, to share his insights on the cybersecurity in automotive.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here talking to everybody today. So let me try and follow David and share with you what Trustonic is doing in the cybersecurity space and some of the ways in which new technology is emerging to help you continue to protect the vehicles and keep vehicle occupants as well as the system safe. So if we go to the next slide, I'll take a moment just to introduce who Trustonic is. So we were a company that was founded by a combination of Arm, Gemalto, and G&D back in 2010. This was when TrustZone technology was first created for Arm chipsets. And we, as a company, were founded to build secure world technology that could be married up to the TrustZone silicon, creating a space where you can run secure code and secure services. We have deployed in very close to 3 billion devices. That includes today 23 million vehicles on road. And I would say between the numbers that David shared and hopefully the numbers that we're sharing, you can see that people are now really starting to take vehicle security seriously. We're getting into the tens of millions of deployments, which is great to see. We have also certified our technology against common criteria EAL 5+. Now, to give a sense of what does that mean, the credit card that you have in your pocket, that will be certified against EAL level 4. With level 5, and the plus indicates that we focused on automotive specific use cases. This is really starting to move into an area where you can give a lot of assurance to vehicle manufacturers, tier 1s, and silicon vendors that the code is not only secure, but it's going to remain secure for a very long time to come. I always say the number that I'm most proud of is 0. We've never had a customer report a breach. And the reason that I'm very proud of that is not only do we work on cars and IoT devices, but we have been working in mobile phones for the last sort of 10 plus years. And if you're going to be hacked and if you're going to be breached, a phone, frankly, is the easiest device in the world to get your hands on. There's a great set of tools to aid any bad actor. We are also always very focused on what's happening in phones because that's what will happen in automotive in a few years' time. And you can see on the right-hand side, just to illustrate, where do we work? We work at the silicon level. So we work with many of the world's leading silicon vendors. to integrate our technology to create what we call a trusted execution environment that allows you to run trusted applications and, importantly, trusted drivers, so that you can have a range of trusted hardware and peripherals running inside the vehicle or any kind of device. And that it's isolated from the other operating systems such as Android, Linux, QNX, AutoSAR, Green Hills, etc. So if we go to the next slide and look at where is TE technology used today inside the vehicle, well, I'd say there are three main areas today. You can run it on almost any ECU, but predominantly what we are seeing is that the uptake is in the infotainment systems and digital cockpits, telematics gateways, and connectivity modules. And not surprising, these are the first major application processing systems that were deployed inside vehicles, and the ones that typically are running a lot of sensitive applications and services that could be valuable to any bad actor who wants to try and attack a system. As you can see from the use cases on the right-hand side, you can use a TE to provide everything from storage for cryptographic keys, support for cryptographic algorithms, to help to enhance the security of software over the air, updating of vehicles, all the way through to providing support for things like DRM and high-value third-party content services that OEMs want to deploy into the vehicle in order to drive their digital revenue systems, and also to provide secure logging of data and systems so that you can safely extract information from the vehicle without risk of an injection attack taking place. So as we think about the future and we think about software-defined vehicles, it often goes hand in hand with digital twin architectures, being able to test at scale in the cloud. But you need to be able to ensure that the data during transit has not been interfered with. So that's where we're seeing TE technology used today. If we go to the next slide, then we can take a look at sort of what's changing. So again, I think, very nicely covered by David, we've got a lot of regulation, and I don't think we're at the end of the regulation journey. I think we're probably really at the beginning. As frustrating as regulation can be, I think it's also highly needed to ensure that the whole supply chain is delivering security. But as mentioned during the opening presentation, we're looking at a world where we're moving into level 3, 4, and 5 autonomous technology, and consumers need to be able to buy with confidence and to know that the vehicles they're buying have, the physical safety goes without saying, but the digital safety now needs to have the same level of attention to detail. And that's really what the regulation is driving. On content protection, so the reason for highlighting this as a driving change in the cybersecurity landscape is that many OEMs are planning to generate tens of billions of dollars of revenue from third-party content and services and delivering their own services inside the vehicle. Now, what we're also seeing are the content owners, the digital agent platforms, the payment scheme companies are saying, if these platforms are not secure, we're not deploying onto them. And that puts at jeopardy those revenue streams that every OEM is building into their forward-looking business plan. And then the third area, and again, this is a big outcome of things like WP29, is secure by design, or what I like to call born secure. So this is the idea that when you're starting next generation vehicle design, the starting point is the security. And that's a massive change. For the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, security has been the thing that you look at once you've finished everything else and then say, how can I add some security? And we do that on a best effort. That's changing to security being at the heart of the vehicle moving forwards. And the first part of the design specification is, how can I ensure I can meet these regulations? And once I finish, I get type approval to ship this vehicle. So three big changes taking place. If we go to the next slide, I think this has probably already been covered, but this just gives an overview of when we look geographically, which markets are covered by which piece of legislation. I always make the point on this slide that by the time we get to 2025, you will not be able to sell a vehicle in any meaningful volume market unless you have built cybersecurity into that vehicle and you are intending to keep it fresh throughout the life cycle of the vehicle. So this is, this is not something that you can put off to tomorrow. It's here now, it's real. And for the companies that don't take it seriously, then they will start to have challenges to be able to sell new vehicles. But I think it's fair to say that we're seeing the industry take this issue very, very seriously now. Again, if we move to the next slide. So again, coming back to this theme of software-defined vehicle, I would say that there's a couple of extra items I would add. One is the sheer volume of software that is implied that will be in the vehicle, anywhere between 500 million to 1 billion lines of code. So as mentioned at the beginning as well, that the more code you put into a vehicle, the more potential attack surfaces you start to add. So you have to think about the entire vehicle security architecture when we're talking about high performance compute environments, and maybe having 3 main HPC systems inside the vehicle driving everything. You also need common security that runs across that entire vehicle, and that starts at the silicon level and extends up through all the different types of security services that you can implement to protect a vehicle. But it will also open up many new use cases. I've highlighted some here, things like in-vehicle payments and the vehicle interacting with the infrastructure around it. That there will certainly be significant changes to how ADAS and autonomous driving systems work as we move into the true era of software-defined vehicles. And again, I think the whole interaction with roadside charging. So we've seen an explosion of EVs, but we haven't seen an explosion yet in the focus on cybersecurity for electric charging. There are some ISO regulations that are being rushed through to try and bridge some of the attack vectors that we've seen opening up. But these are all things that have to be considered as we move forwards. So if we look at what does that mean in terms of hardware-backed security and the role that a trusted execution environment can play, and if we go to the next slide, there are 3 main use cases that I would like to focus on. So the first is post-quantum cryptography, and I put in here the picture of someone literally changing a wheel while the car is moving. This is the challenge that we see with post-quantum cryptography. For anyone who wants to know how quickly can you change that wheel, it's 1 minute 12 seconds is the world record right now, which is pretty impressive. But we will see new forms of attacks being launched against vehicles and the need for next generation post-quantum cryptography schemes, as well as key signatures. And this presents a significant challenge because vehicles on road today are not post-quantum aware. Post-quantum schemes are significantly larger. The key signatures are certainly in the order of 10 to 20 times larger than traditional key architectures, particularly with lattice-based schemes. And so we have to update the infrastructure now to be able to do this. So one of the ways in which a TE provides crypto agility is that the cryptographic libraries that are implemented should be implemented always as individual libraries that can be updated over time, and that also can support what we call hybrid schemes. So this is the idea that a scheme can have a combination of post-quantum and traditional key signatures to allow a step-by-step change and upgrade from a, let's say, an RSA type algorithm all the way up through to something like dilithium, for example, which is part of the NIST approved PQC schemes. So the first is supporting the transition to post-quantum cryptography. And for anybody who thinks this is something to worry about in 5 years' time, this challenge of how do you upgrade the vehicles when you need to needs to be thought about and implemented now so that you are genuinely post-quantum ready. If we move to the next slide, then I think another big area is how we attest vehicles, or how do we ensure that when a vehicle is connecting to a backend system, A, it is the vehicle it claims to be. It is from the manufacturer's facility. B, that it is running the software that it should be running. And then the third part, and this is where we will see a lot of change over the coming years, is that the data in the vehicle while it's being used can continually be verified, that we can make claims about that data to avoid a situation where on start the vehicle talks to the backend system, presents its credentials, it's validated, but then we make the mistake of just trusting everything that vehicle passes to the backend system. Because if there's an attack taking place in real time, the risk is that the vehicle is trusted because it was verified on start, and that it's then become compromised, and that's opened a backdoor to the cloud-based systems. So we are seeing a major change in attestation architectures that will allow things like entity attestation tokens and claims to be made. And claims will really be the ability to say, I'm passing you data, and I can see this data has been signed by something. It could be the TE, it could be a HSM, it could be a secure element, but some form of hardware-backed security has signed this data. I can add trust to it. And a good example of that could be data being generated by a braking system. And then you have untrusted data where you can't add validations around it. And this could be coming from devices connected to a HMI system. So a mobile phone, for example, where as the OEM of that vehicle, you have no role in being able to say, yes, this device that is now passing data to my vehicle is secure. And if I want to collect that usage and behavioral data and pass it upstream to the backend system, I have to recognize that I can't fully trust this data. So I can use it, but I want to be careful with it. I might want to put it in a sandbox to make sure that as I'm analyzing that data, it doesn't have the potential to infect or pass on any kind of malware to my backend systems. So big changes in how we think about trusting and validating both the vehicle and the data that comes off the vehicle. And if we go to the next slide, the final use case that I would highlight is protecting the IP inside the vehicle. So another big part of a software-defined vehicle is that the value, or let's say a portion of the value, is residing in the algorithms and the learning and the training data that resides inside that vehicle. And this poses a challenge, because if that data is all stored in an Android, in a Linux type environment, what we would call the traditional normal world operating systems, these are bigger operating systems. They have more attack surfaces, so that data is more vulnerable. So again, we see a lot of new next generation vehicles, model year 26, 27, exploring the idea of moving these algorithms and the execution of the algorithms, the storage of the data into the secure world, in order to add an extra layer of protection around what potentially is the value driving part of that vehicle sale. So if we go to the last slide, and I will summarize and hopefully leave time for questions. I think, again, what we've heard today is very much around global legislation, and I would also add to that monetization opportunities are driving a strong focus now on software security. We believe that TEs provide a robust foundation for security, and I think with that, then when you look at the types of tools and services that David was talking about, it gives you an extra level of trust in everything that you're doing. Very complementary to other forms of hardware-backed security. So we know that HSMs, SHE modules, SEs have been widely used inside vehicles for a long time, and they're baked into design architectures, but that's not a reason to stick with older solutions. TEs and all of these hardware-backed options can work together to provide layers of security at the hardware level. And again, we think the future use cases become broader and keep adding more and more layers of trust in and around the vehicle. So on that, I will stop there and hand back to the BIS team and look forward to the questions.
Sure. So thank you, David and Andrew, for your views. So I would also like to add some concluding points to the entire discussion. Right, if you can move to the next slide. Right. So some of the points we observed were related to current and future outlook, So the adoption of connected vehicles is increasing at a rapid rate, driven by growing numbers of ECUs in vehicles, advancements in vehicle software, and regulations by governments in leading markets. We foresee that major regional markets, including North America, Europe, and China, are expected to witness multifold growth over the next decade, owing to cybersecurity regulations for connected vehicle OEMs and growing demand for connected vehicles in this market. Next, there are various key trends in the automotive cybersecurity space, as we have discussed, and this includes a growing focus on autonomous driving capabilities, software-defined vehicles, and increasing number of cloud-based applications for new age vehicles. Now, there are various challenges also, such as lack of supporting infrastructure, data vulnerabilities, and increased attack vectors within connected vehicles. Now, if we talk about the demand of automotive cybersecurity solutions, so it has grown with the automotive industry entering into a software-defined era. Automotive OEMs have been pursuing the goal of vertical integration, wherein they are working on the development of cybersecurity solutions in-house or partnering with solution providers. The demand for connected and autonomous vehicles is also on the rise, thus pushing the demand for these type of cybersecurity solutions. When we talk about the state of cybersecurity and software-defined vehicles, we saw that the rise of these type of vehicles has generated significant demand for cybersecurity solutions. There are several suppliers who are offering custom cybersecurity consulting services for various players in the software-defined vehicle ecosystem. Moreover, the startup ecosystem has also been growing rapidly, with several startups entering the market with their innovative solutions. And the role of information technology or operational technology is also increasing with these companies. We also talked about various regulations which were discussed in detail, and we conclude that to strengthen the security for safety critical vehicle hardware and software solutions, and to prevent hackers from vehicles and personal data, concerned organizations in the major markets should coordinate to ratify various cybersecurity regulations. And obviously, we have observed a changing security landscape in the automotive industry, which is developing rapidly because of the introduction of various sensors, various new type of ADAS and autonomous vehicles, and various connectivity solutions that are available in the vehicles nowadays. So it is imperative for the automotive cybersecurity ecosystem to continue to develop cybersecurity solutions to help secure and protect the vehicles of present and future. Next slide, please. Right.
So as you can see on your screen, a lot of our research studies are focused on connected vehicles and related solutions. Some of our recently published reports are automotive cybersecurity market, defense electronic security and cybersecurity market, vehicle diagnostic analytics market, and others. If we talk about upcoming reports and updates, we got global automotive domain ECU market, global automotive software architecture market, and global automotive connected blockchain market. So in case you wish to see our sample of market intelligence report on any of these topics, you may ping on the chat and our team will get back to you soon. So to talk about our AI-based platform, we have Dhruvajyoti. Oh, Dhruvajyoti, over to you.
Right. So next slide, please. Right. So our proprietary platform, which is Insight Monk, is a one-stop solution for customers looking for syndicated reports, company profiles, expert insights, key players data, market statistics, expert consultations, and any type of noise-free search on deep tech topics, and a lot more. It offers a large set of relevant data curated by our internal and network experts and is readily available for access as per the bespoke needs. So Insight Navigator is a market intelligence assistant for Insight Monk, which is also developed by BIS Research, which specializes in deep tech industries. It provides insights and data on various themes such as mobility and automotive, which we are discussing today, and also on various other verticals like healthcare, advanced materials and chemicals, aerospace and defense, agriculture and food tech, energy, electronics, semiconductor, and sustainability, among others. Right. So, yeah, Shai, you can continue.
So with this thought, let me conclude today's session. And now I declare the forum open for any questions from the listeners. I request the listeners to kindly type in the questions, and I'll be happy to pass the questions to the esteemed speakers. Okay, so we got our first question. It's for Mr. David Barzilai. How does the supply chain in the current automotive cybersecurity ecosystem work? What impact will SDVs and more stringent regulations have on this supply chain in the coming years?
Yes, thank you. Today, the supply chain is rather like pyramid shape, meaning that the vehicle manufacturer or the OEM, they buy ECUs, which are the controllers, hardware and software from their tier one. So if they have about 80 such ECUs in the vehicle, then they need to have enough suppliers to provide them. The tier one creates the hardware and the software, but they also buy from tier twos modules of hardware and software to build that system to sell it to the OEM. With the software-defined vehicle, there's a flattening of that supply chain structure, meaning that the OEM buys hardware from the tier one. The hardware is, and they buy microprocessors from NVIDIA or Qualcomm, hypervisor from another, and then they comprise the hardware kind of like backbone. On it, they buy software from multiple vendors in a flat way. So instead of buying the software as part of the system from the tier one, now they have many tier two software providers selling them directly. Also, the OEM creates software in-house. So in essence, you have a flat shape of OEM buys hardware, software like that. So that is one. The second question was about the regulation, and it means that the OEM now needs to impose the cybersecurity regulations on its entire flat structured supply chain. They need to show the OEM that they met the regulation, so the OEM would be able to show that the entire vehicle type is now certified and secure.
Thank you, Mr. Barzilai, for answering that question. The next question is open-ended. Either you or Mr. Andy Till can answer that question. So the question is, how do the Play Store violations or attacks are taken care considering open source Android apps to meet Chinese or in-vehicle payment regulations?
So,
Would you like me to have a go at that first, David?
yeah, I can follow up with you if I have anything to add. Please do.
Yeah. So payments are a really interesting area. We do a lot of work with different payment schemes. So one of the reasons for using hardware-backed security is to provide isolation from the Android world, for example, for payment schemes. So when you typically use a PIN entry system or a biometric authentication system for launching a payments app and verifying the transaction, you're loading secure drivers. So you're not reusing the same drivers and the same level of security that you're using when you're unlocking a phone, for example. You're typically providing a lot of additional protection, which is why a little test you can do is if you open your banking app and you try and screenshot it, you won't be able to capture an image of the screen because the drivers are being loaded from the secure world, and the Android or the Apple system can't see into that application and can't see what's in the foreground at that point in time. So there's a lot of very good process already in place and certification schemes like Visa certified, MasterCard schemes, EMVCo certification that anyone providing a payment system should be validating. And in vehicles, that's no different. When we think about reasons to attack a vehicle and to try and get hold of somebody's data, the instant you put payment credentials into a vehicle, whether they are cloud-based schemes like a PayPal, for example, or whether you're storing the credentials locally, we're making it more attractive to bad actors. So you have to use the hardware-backed mechanisms. And then I think you can also look at all of the other monitoring capabilities that the systems now support, as David presented earlier, to detect if there's any malware sitting on the device trying to do things that it shouldn't do.
So I'd like to add to what Andrew said. Indeed, as you could tell from Andrew's answer, the payment structure and system and the securing payment is a very mature market. Trustonic definitely is a leader in that area to enable the secure payment. And luckily, we can adapt those methods into the vehicle, especially with a software-defined vehicle, where you have the entire idea is to enable end users to upload or download applications and pay for them, or features even, and pay for them on demand. But when it comes to the second part of that question, Android and open source, then this is a much more kind of like open and that's a wired market, because you have so many vulnerabilities. And now when you start dealing with safety and with vehicles that utilize the open source and Android, in general, there's a much greater exposure. Not only that, but the Chinese regulation required the OEMs to be accountable for the third-party applications that do use open source and Android and stuff like that. The biggest challenge over there, from our point of view, for those suppliers and the OEM is to ensure runtime integrity. There are methods to solve it. Some of them are very established and proven, but they must be deployed in order to overcome those new vulnerabilities as they are discovered in runtime, or even non-vulnerabilities that must not be exploited in order not to jeopardize end user safety and privacy, and with that to violate the Chinese regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew Till and David Buzzley for answering that question. So our next question is for Mr. Andrew Till. So the question is, with the automotive industry entering into the software-defined era, there is a growing need for unified security architecture. What are your views on this?
So I would absolutely agree. I think that's going to be one of the big fundamental changes of moving away from what David described earlier as, looking at security component by component and then dealing with the integration challenge, when that normally results in having multiple different key injection systems in the factory, different test systems, different policy management, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think there's a cost of ownership driver that says the more you can standardize on a common vehicle security architecture, you can take cost out of the backend systems and the management. And there's also an element, a big part of the regulations are active monitoring, proactive remediation of the issues. And to do that when you are using a disparate or fragmented security environment is extremely challenging. So the regulations, I think, will absolutely drive it. From the level where we work, the hardware backed security, we work on the vast majority of automotive silicon, so we can absolutely deliver a base foundational level of technology to tier ones and OEMs. And then I think we will see, and I'll let David perhaps elaborate on this, I think we'll see a tighter, more strategic engagement with security providers. So it's not just a please respond to this RFQ. It's we are developing a new vehicle. Please work with us to understand what state-of-the-art protection looks like and collaborate with us on the development of the requirements, etc., so that it's back to this concept of something being born secure. It's the first thing you start with, not the last thing.
So ideally, indeed, secure by design is much easier to implement. Unfortunately, we see that OEMs and suppliers take security as kind of like, let's call it, well, the features first, security second. So they're much more challenged by the time to market and by how to design and to implement the features. And then the question is how to be able to kind of like make the end product secure or secure enough to pass the regulation, although security providers were brought in not at the first, right out of the gate, but rather towards QA or, mid phases of development, or even after everything is already done. So for that, you need to have the agility of solutions, the ability to start by gap analysis. Provide me the documents of your architectural documents. Let's do gap analysis. Let's see what are the most radical issues that must be addressed now, and the rest could be postponed with a good reason. Or there is an elegant way to apply software as part of the build or the CI/CD to protect the binaries as they are. And that enables to still meet the cybersecurity regulations and the level of posture required, even if it's being adopted late to the game and not from the design phase. As ideally it would be, but in most cases, unfortunately, it's not the case.
Thank you, Mr. Barzilai and Andrew for answering that. So if you can quickly respond, we have got another question. This is for Mr. David Barzilai. So what are the key challenges faced by cybersecurity solution providers today?
It's a very good question. And, practically it's tied to the latter part of my answer before. We are brought in late. And customers are under time pressure to meet the business plan. They need to meet the regulation, which is somewhat foreign to them. R&D is not so familiar with cybersecurity. So the question is how to support your customers without interfering their R&D processes and time to market. That's one. Second thing is how to create trust. Because who am I? Who am I to go and tell them what to do? Who am I to, yes, we are cyber experts, but they are their own product experts and subject matter experts. So we have found that the pragmatic approach is the one that is best suited for our customers' needs and constraints and to our own ability to show value and to prove trust. Meaning that we start with a small project, either pen testing a module of the ECU, or doing the TARA project, the threat analysis, risk assessment, or gap analysis. They are very limited time projects. The risk from the customer's point of view is minimal. And with that, we highlight the problems and we also create trust, and that enables to sell to a greater need and a vaster area of our customers and enable them to meet the regulation without interfering the time to market.
Thank you, Mr. David, for answering that question. So with that question, we are closing the panel for the discussion for the questionnaire round. So these are the questions we could address during today's webinar session. We thank all the attendees for attending the webinar. In case you have any queries or questions regarding this webinar, you can mail us at hello@bisresearch.com, or you can type in the chat your questions. So we hope that today's webinar session was insightful for all the attendees and hope to see you all in our upcoming webinars on deep tech titles as well. We'd also like to offer a huge thanks to our esteemed speakers, Mr. David Barzilai and Mr. Andrew Till, for sharing their valuable insights on cybersecurity in automotive. connected vehicles and growing security vulnerabilities. So with the promise of delivering more such insightful discussions on deep tech topics in the future, we would like to take your leave. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Andrew.